What's up guys, my name is Liam and today we're going to be talking about a brand new control pad. This is a collaboration between Loga and Micemod. This is called the Tenchi Pro. This is actually a pretty different, unique mouse pad from anything else that I've used before, but is this going to be the perfect gaming mouse pad for you? Let's check it out. And before we get started, I want to let you guys know that Micemod actually did send this out to me, so thank you guys very much for that. However, with that being said, they didn't tell me anything to say, so everything you'll be seeing in this video today will be my own words and my truthful, honest opinions. This arrived to my front door, nicely packaged, and it does come included in the sleeve to store it in. And on the front here, nice and clean with their logos included, and then when you flip it over here to the back, it does have some of the specifications for the mouse pad right here. The colorway is a limited edition run. This is called Viva Magenta. It was color of the year for 2023, and as you can see here, if you were to compare it to another red style pad, it does have a different look to it. And the dimensions sit at 500 millimeters in width by 500 millimeters in height, and it's 3.5 millimeters in thickness. The base is an authentic Rogers Poron, and it is more of a mid-style base, so it is a little bit firmer. I haven't had an issue with anything sticking to my desk, so this has worked perfectly. If I did want to move it around, I do kind of have to lift it up a little bit more to get some movement out of it, but once I've laid it flat, it has stuck to my desk nicely, and it hasn't moved around on me at all while I've been using it. And with this base coming in at 3.5 millimeters, again, it is a firmer mid-style base. The Artisan mid-style is 3 millimeters. They do feel very similar to one another. Obviously, since this one is a little bit thicker, it feels slightly a bit more plush, but overall the characteristics between the two are very similar to one another. The stitching is done very nicely. It feels incredibly premium. I don't have any complaints about the stitching at all. It sits about at level with the actual pad itself, but I never came across any issues while I was gaming on this. I never felt it or noticed it rubbing up against my forearm, bothering me or anything like that. They do have their logo down here in the bottom right corner, and if I were to bring my mouse over here, it is kind of like almost like a vinyl graphic that sticks up off the pad. It can kind of catch the skate if you were to get over there, but for me personally, I never have an issue to where I get over to the bottom right corner of the mouse pad myself when I'm gaming. And then finally, the surface is truly what makes this pad so unique and stand apart from anything else that I've used. Every piece of this feels so premium, well thought out, and well put together, and the surface is no exception. This is probably one of the smoothest surfaces, especially for a control type style pad, that I've probably ever used before. And the best way that I can describe it to you is, I don't know exactly the material that it's made out of, but it does feel a bit more like a tougher style of a material, something kind of like a polyester. So when I'm telling you guys that this surface is incredibly smooth, it almost feels like a flattened out, smoother type of a polyester surface. It doesn't feel like something similar to like the Lamzu Energon, for example. The material on the Energon, it does feel a little bit softer and more silkier, but again, overall this gives you an incredibly smooth feeling. And if you were to rub your hand across the top of the surface and you were to compare it to something like the Artisan FX Zero, the Artisan FX Zero definitely has more of a texture there. It has more of an abrasiveness feeling to it, whereas again, this just completely feels like a flattened out pad, and you don't necessarily feel any type of texture or abrasiveness on the surface. And as I was gaming on this and testing it out, I was really trying to get involved with moving my forearm around it and seeing how it interacts with your skin, and it didn't cause me any type of issues or discomfort. It just feels incredibly smooth across your forearm. And the performance on this pad is insane. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I've ever used or experienced to where you get more of a mid-style base, you have such an incredibly smooth, flattened out surface, and you just get absolutely insane control on this thing. If you were to put no pressure on your mouse and be really light with it, as you're sliding it across the top of this surface, it has an incredibly smooth glide. And as you start using it and gaming with it, the dynamics change really quickly. If you put any type of weight on your mouse or any type of pressure, the amount of control that this surface offers is insane. When you start putting weight on the mouse or pushing into the pad while you're gaming with it, the amount of control that you get, it accelerates quite rapidly. And I feel like this pad really excels in games like Valorant and CSGO, because the greatest specialty about this is it has some of the greatest stopping power. This has so much control. When I was playing faster style games, it was really hard for me to get used to it, because you really got to try and put a lot of movement in it with the micro adjustments. And it is really different feeling, because I feel like pads that are like this, that are soft, they tend to feel a bit muddy. This doesn't necessarily so much feel muddy to me. It just has so much stopping power that even if you let up on the movement just a little bit, it comes to a complete stop, and it's almost almost like you have to start all over again when you're switching directions. And one of the things that they focused on the surface is this is not a coated surface, and they really wanted to respond well to humidity so that this gives you an incredibly consistent experience from start to finish in your gameplay. And I especially feel like that is an incredibly important quality to have, because when you're dealing with this much control and this much stopping power, it was really nice to be able to get a solid and consistent feel for how it plays. Since I am in an extreme humid environment, I didn't have to worry about this changing on me or feeling any differently or getting too muddy. So let's do a rundown of some different skates here to see how they all perform on this pad before we get started in anything else. And again, I hate to keep repeating myself, but I do live in a lot of humidity. So with the glass skates, I really feel like the glass skates just didn't work out on this pad for me. Again, it could be because of humidity, but I do feel like you get a much slower glide with the glass skates, and you do absolutely get a muddier feeling. The sapphire skates, however, they do perform more consistently. I do feel like they have a bit more of a smoother glide. They feel a bit faster on here, and overall they definitely felt a lot more consistent over the glass skates. And then when it comes to these smaller style corner skates or the bigger skates, they honestly both perform pretty equally to one another. I do feel like the smaller corner skates, they do perform just slightly a bit quicker, but I don't really like using corner skates that much when I'm using control pads, because I feel like when you push in the pad a bit more, even though this is a mid base, I didn't have too many issues with it sinking in too much, but I feel like the corner skates, they do kind of sink in a little bit more if you're to push hard on it, and it can overall kind of give you more of a slower, muddier type of a feeling. And when you're using the bigger skates, I do feel like the bigger skates have a little bit slower of a glide. They give you a little bit more control, but the good thing about the bigger skates on these control pads is when you really push into it, I don't feel like it ever gets too muddy. Yeah, it can give you a little bit more stopping power, but I don't feel like it sinks into the pad too much, and it kind of makes your mouse feel a little bit smoother and a little bit more consistent. And I did forget to mention to you guys, by the way, these are actually the esports Tiger skates for the Logitech G Pro Superlight. And then finally, if you were to use this pad to play faster style of games, two of my favorite feet choices that I'd recommend, first off, is the Superglide V2s. I was truly impressed and absolutely loving how the Superglide V2s perform on this. You have very minimal initial static friction when you're using the Superglides. It definitely doesn't feel as slow and as controlled as on the PTFE skates. You do get a little bit faster range of movement, but again, with these glass skates, they're incredibly consistent, but they do have a slight texture on them, so you still get the insane control and the insane stopping power with the Superglide V2s, and these are by far one of my favorite skates when I was playing faster type games like Apex Legends. And then finally, some of my favorite skates that I've been using, these are the 0.8mm dot skates. These have an incredibly fast glide. They have a little bit less initial friction. I would say that the Superglide V2s, they have a little bit less initial friction than even the dot skates do. But again, you get an incredibly fast and smooth glide on this pad with these. And one of the greatest characteristics is you get really great insane control and stopping power. You have no problem stopping on a dime, even with the dot skate. Okay, so starting out here, the only thing I can really think of that I can compare this to and other things that are similar out there on the market, this is the Artisan FX Zero, and this does have the mid base. And like I mentioned earlier, when you do push into both these, you do notice just a slight bit more of plushness on the Tenchi Pro, but overall they feel very similar to one another. The speed on both of these pads, it's not too far apart from one another. I do feel like the Zero does feel just slightly a bit quicker, but the one thing that I notice is when you start really pushing into these and you're trying to slow down, get more control, or come to stops, the Tenchi Pro has much greater control and it has much greater stopping power. And I'd say overall the characteristics between the Zero and something even like the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro, these are pretty similar to one another. I do feel like the Saturn Pro does have a little bit more control than the Zero. However, if you're looking for the most control possible, I definitely feel like the Tenchi Pro has a slower glide and more control over both of them. And just to throw this up here for comparison with you guys really quick. So this is the Zero in the Dido Orange colorway. This is in the xSoft version. So typically when I'm using control pads, most of the control pads out there, they're kind of replicating something like this. They'll have a pour-on base that does feel more plush and easier to push into. Overall, I feel like this pad feels a little bit looser and a bit faster in the Dido Orange colorway. Coming over here to the Tenchi Pro, the Tenchi Pro definitely has a way more controlled glide, and it does feel a lot slower compared to something like the dye orange colorway in the xSoft. And then finally, as I was trying to think of other things I can compare this to, one thing that did come to my mind was the Freefall SV Base Control Plus. I absolutely love the Freefall, but to me personally, the Freefall kind of falls under the category more of a hybrid style. And another reason I thought of bringing this up is this has more of a hard, firmer style base. So something a little bit more comparable to the Mid, even though this Mid is more plush than the Freefall. I feel like overall, the glide on the Freefall, it feels quite a bit faster than the Tenchi Pro. The Tenchi Pro feels like a much slower control pad. And as you can see here, the Freefall pad, it feels more like a hybrid, and you do have more speed across the glide. And when you do push into the Freefall, you do get a bit more control and you get pretty good stopping power properties. But the Tenchi Pro is just a lot slower. It has a lot more control and stopping power. All right, guys, so that wraps things up on the Tenchi Pro. And like I told you guys, I have really been loving this thing. I really believe that once it starts getting in more people's hands, I really feel like they're going to have a hit on their hands here, because this offers such different and unique characteristics out there. And I really feel like that there's a market for the type of characteristics that this offers. And though you can use this on all types of games out there, this necessarily wouldn't be my first choice for something like Apex Legends, where you have a lot more movement and you get more involved with the micro movements and the micro adjustments. However, I do feel like this is going to be very popular and it's going to greatly excel in games like Valorant and CSGO. And I can truly say, if you'd like all the characteristics and properties that I brought up in this video today, and you are looking for the greatest control and stopping power, I would definitely recommend that you guys check this out. All right, guys, so if you have any questions or feel like there's anything I left out, please let me know down in the comments below. Aside from that, if you have enjoyed watching this video and are interested in seeing more videos like this in the future, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you soon.